What's going on, everybody? It is May 30th, 2023, Daily Log episode number 10, volume 2. Today we're going to cover ES, dollar, EU, and GU. So there's going to be a lot more. I mentioned last week how I was going to be placing some attention on Forex again. So I'm going to try to do these as swiftly as possible. Depending on what happens that day and what I find fruitful, I will cover. I'm going to do my best to cover ES as much as possible since that is what I started out on. I know a lot of you are trading it as well and would like some clarity on it. So I'm going to do my best to make these very short to the point, but still have a lot of value in them. So looking at ES on the daily time frame here, if you watched the weekly forecast yesterday, I mentioned how the daily time frame to me looked like it could set up a potential fair value gap. And I've talked about how you can predict those type of days depending on the day of the week and what you're looking for as far as the weekly expansion. So we went ahead and got that. Today, I'll show on lower time frames. We ran out the sell side liquidity I mentioned in the Telegram. Nothing too major. I'll point out on the lower time frames. As far as what I believe what will happen on ES, I would prefer price dip down into here using this mitigation block in here as well. You could technically call it a breaker from a low, high, lower low, than a higher high. Just to me, I'm not going to place too much attention on that. I'd rather focus on the fair value gap, see if you can just IOFED it and then expand higher into the buy side liquidity. I still remaining bullish on this when you're looking at a weekly time frame. To me, there's nothing in here that would suggest lower prices, especially with the way last week the candle closed. If you look at the 3-day, if you take this all away, there's a bullish order block in here. So we opened up here, expanding down into the open there on that. So I think we can get expansion away from here in the next day or two. Maybe tomorrow prints the low of the week. Who really knows? I'm looking at the 4-hour time frame. We came into that fair value gap in here, closed in the volume imbalance in there from the opening. Looking at the 1-hour time frame, didn't quite meet this one in here. I was looking to see if we could meet these new week opening gaps, the old new week opening gaps that were in confluence with it. Didn't quite meet it in there. A lot of residing inside of the current new week opening gap today. When you look at lower time frames in here, reach down into a 15-minute reclaim fair value gap right around PM session. All of this was really, really muddy to me. And it doesn't surprise me. It's the reason why I'm trying to move away from this until something becomes clear in here. Because even if you look at a 5-minute time frame, look at all of these wicks in here. It's very, very thin in volume to me. It just looks very, very stagnant. And I'll show you comparison to like Forex, the way full bodily closures and the expansion and the speed and the nice volatility that we're getting in it comparison to futures. It's to me, it's just not worth my time, and I'm not going to harp on it anymore. But prior to the open, 30 minutes after the open, we had a news driver event. I said on Telegram, I was briefly looking at ES that the 4220 sell side liquidity looked like a draw on liquidity to me. A lot of sell side liquidity built up overnight. We didn't quite meet this high here, but if you look at Dow and you look at NQ, there's the bearish SMT here. With this being the draw on liquidity to me, you have a high being ran out here, displacement lower. Maybe start looking at lower time frames in here. I'm only going to cover to the point where we ran out the sell side. But if this loads, when this started to break down in here, we had a bearish breaker. So you have a high, a low, higher high, then a lower low. If you extend out all these last down close candles, they'll act as your bearish breaker. And if you really want to refine it, you could take that last down close, lowest down close candle in here, extend that out in time. We came back to it again. But if you take all of them and you utilize it when you go down to a 1-minute time frame, things become a little bit clearer. Right after the open in here, small fair value gap, retraced up into it, displacement lower. You can see all the back and forth in here. It's really nothing clean as far as really nice expansions. I mentioned right at the news driver event or even a minute before, We had a small SIBI in here, retraced up into it, and then we saw the cascade lower into the 42.20 sell side liquidity. Then we saw a retracement higher back into the breaker, then sold off, returned back into the SIBI in here, and then we kind of just slowly moved out of here into the sell side lower into those higher time frame fair value gaps. So today, to me, was just setting up potentially tomorrow to go higher. Nothing super significant. Like I said, it's really muddy to me, and until I see something clear for weeks and days on that, I probably won't return to ES. To be honest with you, I'm having a lot of fun with Forex, and it's only the first day. So let's go over to dollar here. I wouldn't utilize dollar if you're trading ES. I think it has no significance right now. It's completely decoupled. So I'm only utilizing dollar for Forex currently. And here we saw lower movement. Today, I was looking to see if we could reach into this fair value gap. I still believe that's going to be the draw on liquidity for tomorrow. If we are truly bullish, I'd like to see this respected and then see higher prices from there. I'm only really pointing out this one, just leaving it on in case of some type of inversion level, but it means nothing to me right now. I'd like an expansion into the buy side there. The volume bounce here. 4-hour time frame. Took out buy side liquidity, and we saw a rapid displacement lower. This is all London session. So London session was very, very fruitful. And with Forex, you're going to get that. It's the same thing as basically futures, just kind of reversed, where to me, London is AM session, New York is PM session for Forex. So I particularly like to trade AM session for Forex just because I'm a lot more alert and I'm awake and I'm asleep during the London. So I prefer just to trade New York session, and that way I have London behind me. And if I miss the move, then it just kind of is what it is. You have to submit to one of them. To me, unless you have a time zone that is in that area where you can trade both, then by all means. But we saw this displacement lower in here, shift underneath that low there. And I was looking to see if we could target the sell side here and then these lower BISIs in here. Do note we have sell side resting underneath 103.36. So if we start moving and collapsing beneath these, that could be a potential draw. But for now, just looking for the sell side here. Bearish breaker in here. And this morning's trade, if you reel it all the way back, there was a fair value gap in here, and we just touched the bottom end of that breaker. I was thinking if we could just snap lower into the sell side there. But we moved up into the breaker, higher fair value gap coupled within it. Now we're seeing a nice displacement lower. I still believe that's the draw on liquidity down here. Moving over to EU. I'm going to go out to a daily time frame in here. To me, even on a daily time frame for EU, it's still a little muddy to me. Same with GU. I'll show you, but the lower time frames have a lot of clarity to them, which I really, really do like. The higher time frames is a little muddy. We're not getting huge expansions in here, leaving imbalances in price. So small fair value gap in here we returned into. These last two up close candles will be your bearish order block. We dipped down into the volume bounce in here. Really nice reaction over London session, an expansion higher. I still believe we can draw all the way down into these relative equal lows. I think that's going to be a major draw on liquidity for EU unless we see some type of large expansion out of here. But there's nothing in here that would signal me to look for that type of reversal right now. 4-hour time frame. If you look at the fair value gap in here, dip down into there, the bodies are telling the story in here. If you look in here, dip down into this fair value gap, IOFED'd it. I think this could be a potential draw on liquidity for EU going into tomorrow. And this is where my trade was this morning. So I'm going to annotate the London session because it was a really nice market maker buy model in here. But we closed above this high there after running out sell stops, returning into that volume imbalance, the 4-hour fair value gap, the 1-hour fair value gap, saw a displacement higher, shift above this high here, leaving a breaker with a fair value gap / balanced price range coupled within it. So to me, it was a really high probability setup. And I did a really good job at managing the trade and pulling partials and protecting myself because I could tell that dollar was not wanting to slip off lower. And I had a feeling that we may not get this large expansion out of here today because we move so much overnight. And sometimes if you have those large movements overnight, the AM session can be unfruitful. So I did a great job at managing that. I was able to pull off 1% in here. I was looking to see if I could get 3-4% up into that high there. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get it, but regardless, still able to manage it. Dip down into this fair value gap once more into the breaker. It's actually last 2 up close candles. I'm just using the last up close in here. Small fair value gap, and since basically the open, we were expanding away from it. So I think that high there and the high at 107 is probably the draw for now. Looking at GU in here, let me go out to a daily time frame. This is a little muddy for me, meaning that there's just not a lot of clarity. I think I'm still going to expect downside due to the dollar, but we did run out sell side liquidity in here. We've returned into this bearish breaker and this bearish order block in here, which we've utilized multiple times. So I'll show on lower time frames in here. These relative equal highs seem like a really nice draw on liquidity for GU. So we expanded higher in here, and I'll show on lower time frames. We had a bullish SMT with EU taking out its low here, but GU failed to do it, and dollar made that higher high. So it's a bullish SMT between the three. Same thing as you would utilize with NASDAQ and YM. Dip down to this 4-hour fair value gap. We're seeing an expansion away from it. If you look at the 1 hour, we've dipped down into this fair value gap in here. So I think this is going to be the draw on liquidity overnight. That's going to be my bias. So 124.710 would be the draw on liquidity for GU right now. As long as dollar wants to remain heavy to the downside, that would be the draw on liquidity for it. And GU can get really, really wild. So 30-minute time frame came down to this fair value gap, and you can see overnight we took out sell side liquidity, and then we saw this expansion higher. That's what I wanted to annotate. I knew I was forgetting something. Let me dip down into a 5-minute. That was it for a GU. I just want to cover EU because it was very nice. So inside of this area is that volume bounce on a daily time frame, right? So we dipped down into that overnight, running out these sell stops here. We ran out these sell stops underneath the low there, and then we saw this expansion higher. So we have 2 sell stops returning into a higher time frame bullish PD array. You have dollar slipping off lower. And then if you look, you have original consolidation, accumulation, reaccumulation, smart money reversal, and then we see an expansion higher. And that would be your draw on liquidity because that's the original consolidation, right? So we see an expansion away from here, and then you see a small 5-minute fair value gap, which would be a shift above this high here. So you have 2 sell side liquidity pools being ran out, a higher time frame bullish PD array being met, bullish SMT, seeing a displacement higher, IOFED, this fair value gap in here, see a displacement once more, and then if you extend out this last up close candle in here, and if you go out to a 15-minute time frame, it's going to be a little bit more clear. So if you extend out this last up close candle here, we dip down into that. That's your bullish breaker. So let me go back down to a 5-minute. And then we see expansion higher, right? Targeting the original consolidation. So to me, there were 2 really nice entries in here. And this was all during London session. And this is off the backbone that you're meeting a daily time frame bullish PD array. So those are really high probability. You're running out sell stops. You have a breaker. You have a fair value gap in here. Very minimum risk for a really high reward. And here, let's just say for the sake of it, you did enter in here. You're running about almost 40 pips. So to me, it's really, really nice. If you wanted to get some standard deviations to get some projections, you take from this dealing range low down here, you inverse swing it. So you're taking from this range low to that range high, and you're getting standard deviations. You have one here, basically right at the original consolidation, and then you have one more up here. So didn't quite meet it, but only a few pips away from it. Based about 3, 4 pips out of the standard deviation. So not too bad. That's how you would utilize a market maker buy model. To me, it was really, really clean. That's basically going to be it for EU. And let me show the account real quick. So in here, we're up basically 1%. And last week we left off at break even. I didn't take any trades, didn't do anything else until today. So that's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully I was able to make it compact and concise as possible. Until tomorrow, good luck and good trading, everybody. Be safe.